Good afternoon. This morning, the President of the General Assembly addressed the General Assembly's meeting on Security Council reform. This is the plenary's first formal meeting on this topic in the 72nd session. In his remarks, the President noted that Security Council decisions can mean the difference between life or death, and the Council's work is seen as one of the major indicators of the UN's role in the world. So he told member states that if they don't answer calls for change to the Council, then the continued relevance and even the very survival of the UN is at stake. Noting that we're approaching the 10th year of intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform, the President said, "The time for trying is up. What's needed now is real dialogue, real listening, and real interaction." He said, "Without these elements, this process will become nothing but a statement reading exercise, and it will feature nothing but the repetition of well-known and static positions." Calling for a credible process and meaningful progress, the President stressed his commitment to transparency and inclusivity. He acknowledged that some member states were standing on opposite ends of the spectrum, but he also said it was possible for them to make history. His full remarks are on our website. Currently, there are 63 speakers inscribed to take the floor. 7 of those representatives are speaking on behalf of groups. The meeting is expected to continue into the afternoon. And that's it from me. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Brenden. I took note of what the Secretary General, or the President of the GA has just said. Does he think that the reforms of the Security Council can be achieved by consensus, especially when it comes to the question of the veto?
Well, as he said, he realizes that this is going to be a very difficult process. The member states, some of them are on opposite ends of the spectrum, but he will do whatever the member states allow him to do. He just appointed the co-chairs for the intergovernmental negotiations, so he's done that relatively early so that the process can get underway as soon as possible. Sorry, yes.
Follow up.
Yeah.
This process of negotiations within the negotiating group has taken a quarter of a century. What does he think that is going to be new in the new efforts undertaken?
Sure. Well, as he sees it right now, his focus is on people. He wants to make sure that the people understand that the UN is working for them to improve their lives. And if the people do not have trust in the Security Council, and if they see it as an outdated body, then that hurts the credibility of the UN, and it hurts people in general. So all that he can do is advance the process to the extent that the member states allow him to do it. The process itself is in the hands of the member states. He cannot take control of it and force the member states to do anything that they don't want to. All he can do is create the conditions for further talks, and that's through, for example, appointing the co-chairs and helping them to guide these talks. Right now, part of the process includes putting together a calendar to facilitate member states coming together and giving them timelines in which they can advance. But at the same time, he can't impose any artificial deadlines on a membership that doesn't want that. So it's not really up to him to kind of make predictions or to anticipate what may or may not happen. He can only use his power as the president to convene member states, bring them together, and impress upon them why it's important to reform this body that's so crucial to maintaining international peace and security. Yes?
Is the PGA going to continue with the PRs of Tunisia and Romania as the co-chairs of the IGN, or is he going to appoint somebody new?
No, he's already appointed 2 new co-chairs. They're the PRs of Georgia and the United Arab Emirates. Yes, sure.
Brenden, in terms of text-based negotiations, how far away are we from that text-based process?
Sure. Well, as you may know, that's a very controversial topic for the member states. Some favor text-based negotiations, others do not. So it's not really for the president to get involved in those discussions. And there's no timeline for the Security Council reform process. So I can't give you any dates or how far the membership is or is not away from that process.
So I guess the question then is what does the PGA hope to achieve by the end of his term in office? I mean, previous PGAs have said, I want text-based negotiations. They've not delivered on that. What's the goal he's setting here, besides the fact that he doesn't have much power in the process?
Well, the goal is to ensure that the Security Council is credible as it can be, that it is as efficient and as representative as it can be. How that happens is really up to the member states. So he cannot. he cannot impress his will upon the member states. He's in a very specific position here. All he can do is create the conditions to take the process forward and hope that the member states follow suit and actually do that. Yes, Matthew.
Sure, thanks a lot. I wanted to ask you, again, it has to do with, I guess, transparency of PGA offices, current and past. In the what's being called the Paradise Papers, it's emerged that Sam Kutesa, previous PGA, had offshore firms in the Seychelles, including funded by a business, NHAS, that did business with the UN. What I'm wondering is, it seems to overlap with his time as PGA. So my question would be, I guess, one, does the current PGA believe that it's appropriate for a PGA to have these offshore tax avoidance or evasion vehicles? And two, does he think that going forward, maybe beginning with him, there should be just a kind of a yes or no question of whether incoming PGAs have offshore tax vehicles and what's in them and how they're used?
Well, I can only speak on the actions of the current president of the General Assembly. I can't really speak about past PGAs or future PGAs. For the president's part, as you know, he's been putting forth the highest levels of transparency and ethics that he can. Right now, his financial disclosure is still with the outside reviewer that's working with our ethics office to make sure that you all are aware of how he is behaving in an ethical and transparent manner, and you're aware of what steps he's taking to maintain the transparency of his office and of his person. So I can't comment on what future PGAs should or should not do. I can only comment on him.
And what takes so long with the form? I'm not saying that, I'm just wondering. It doesn't seem like is it a very complicated form?
That's up to the external reviewer. I mean, we kind of depend on them to do the review. They work with the ethics office. For the president's part, he submitted his financial disclosure ahead of the deadline, so he's done whatever has been asked of him, and then it's up to us to wait to get feedback. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Abadi.
Thank you. Do we understand, do I understand from what you said before that the president of the GA thinks that if the council is not reformed, this would be a threat to the future of the United Nations?
Absolutely. That's exactly what he said in his statement. He said if we do not, if the member states do not listen to the calls for change in the Security Council, that could threaten the credibility and the very survival of the UN, because the Security Council is such a visible part of the UN. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.